Hey everyone! Welcome classmates! Today is another one of our episodes with the Philippine Guild of Watercolorists infotainment series WaterNTechnicolor, where we provide you with information to better up your skills with regards to watercolor painting. And for today's topic, we're gonna do some painting in monochromatic studies for landscapes. Well, it could be a bit difficult, isn't it? We're gonna apply those things right now. And it's a bit interesting, or it could be quite intimidating. It depends. We'll never know unless we practice. But the pressure is off because you could do this one at home at your own pace in your own time. But for those who want to paint along, and well, you might just as watch as well. But for those who really want to paint, let's get our brushes, our paper. For this one, we're gonna apply all those things that we learned in the first 3 episodes. Let's get started!
Welcome. In today's lesson and video demonstration, we're gonna apply all the techniques that we had learned in the previous lessons and episodes of our WaterNTechnicolor. So we're going to apply a wash, a wet into wet painting, and take note of the loading of the paint and the brush. Now we are gonna do a monochromatic painting, and we're gonna use a Prussian blue for this one. The focus of this landscape is for us to deepen our understanding with regards to tonality. We will also need the Prussian blue that we had used in the previous demonstrations and a separate mixing well so that we can dilute this paint and apply water. A flat brush or a mop brush can be used for this painting as well. We will begin this process by painting the top portion of the sky and wetting this one with water using the brush. If you happen to have a smaller mop brush, you will need to move quickly and apply water in the large area. Now, let us begin. This step of painting, we will have to avoid the mountains. We will just be wetting the portion that we need to do a wet into wet painting to impress the shapes of the cloud. We will dilute the Prussian blue with water, and we need to apply this one on the wet surface of the paper. The paper needs to have more water so that the spreading and diffusion of paint would be smooth and flawless. As you can see, we are still trying to avoid the mountains by just moving around or painting around the shape of the mountain range. We need to make sure that the lines stay there so that we can apply paint there later on. Now, the next step of the process is move towards the middle section of the painting, which is the mountain range. We will now mix a paint, and we have to make sure that the paint is not too saturated. We also need to be a bit more careful by applying the paint to the mountain range and making sure that we leave a tiny or small amount of hairline separation between the sky and the mountains. As you can see, upon touching with the water or the wet portion of the sky, it bleeds about and spreads rapidly to the wet section of the painting. Next, the one in the left section needs to have a stronger mix of color to show that the subject or the mountain is closer to the distance to the viewer or the eye of the observer. So, we add more paint to the mixture and apply this one on the paper. Moving even further and closer to the bottom of the paper, we need to mix just a little bit more strong mixture so that we will be able to impress trees coming into the view from the distance, again to the eye of the observer. So we increase the tonality by adding more paint to the mixture and loading this one on the brush. Moving towards the bottom section again, we will be painting and loading a little bit less water and reduce the paint loaded into the brush or paint that we mix with water. And we're going to avoid the lines to show that the rice paddies are separated by dividends for each field, and we have to be careful while doing this. In the distance, there should be some houses visible, and we're going to paint carefully using a smaller brush and have a leave out for the rooftops of the houses. So we have to be careful for this one, and we need the highlights to show that there are some rooftops, and care is also needed for this one. As the initial paints begins to dry, we will be loading the brush with more paint but less water to show and impress some trees and foliages. In the distance, we need the horizon. Now, let's do this one. To lend the mountain a more natural look, we will need to apply a dry stroke of paint to the now beginning to dry layers of color in the mountains. We will also do some touch-ups by adding more paint to the bottom section of our rice paddies. Now, in opposition to the one that we had just done, we will be doing some lifting by reducing the paint that is in the paper and the right side where we had applied paint before in the mountains. We can also lift some paint in the sky portion so that we can show the shape of the clouds, and this will be better if the paint has not yet fully dried. Make sure that the brush is not more than wet than the paper. We will further refine the mountains and the foliage from the trees by doing some lifting with even a smaller brush. Now, as the paper begins to dry, we are going to apply a dry stroke of paint moving upwards using a flat brush, or you can also use a round brush for this one. You just have to do a quick moving swiping motion moving upwards, pulling the paint away from the brush. Now, using a flat brush, we're just going to add a bit more texture or say shape to the fields by applying a wash, a broken line of paint with a wash. We're going to add more grasses, more textures by applying another stroke of paint, and we have just to make sure that we do not overdo this one. Now, upon inspection, the right side of the painting seems to be lacking some content. So, I'll be painting a small shrub or a tree in this section of the painting. In this part of the painting, the tonal values must be very saturated, and I'm using just a small amount of water with my paint. This one is considered more like a dry brush application. Now let's add a smaller shrub in this part. Finally, we are going to break the open space or the monotony of this part of the sky by drawing some birds flying over the distance. I'm going to sign this painting after this one is finished. Now, looking at our finished work, we had shown that by varying or playing with a wet painting, we can produce a smooth gradient from the sky. We can show that the mountains have a distance by varying the tonality. The ones that are appearing near in our view and the ones receding in the distance have different tonal values. You can also further see that the textures, the deepness of the tones, and the differences of the condition from the wet paper to the dry paper produces excellent effect that leaves satisfying results. So, I hope you found this demonstration valuable and informative.
Alright, can we see your work? You can put your comments down below so we can see your work and let us know what are the topics you want to be covered in the future. Get those comments rolling down in the section. If you have questions, we might as well answer them in our next episode. So guys, did you enjoy this topic for today? I know. Well, that's all we have for today, folks. See you guys on our next episode of Water and Technicolor. This is again your host, Emmanuel Silva. And let's have some more discoveries, let's have fun, and let's get painting every day. See ya!